All right, so today we're going deep on David Sanborn.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we all know him, right? The saxophonist
Right.
who wasn't just playing notes, but blending genres, shaping the sound of contemporary music.
Absolutely.
But how did he get there? From blues clubs all the way to Hollywood films.
Yeah.
What is it about that signature sound that
Mhm.
made him so influential?
You know, it's funny you say signature sound because that's kind of, I think, what sets him apart, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about that bright, edgy alto sax, it's just got that bite to it.
Yeah.
But it's also so expressive, like it can sing.
Yeah.
And he didn't just play jazz.
Yeah.
He was fusing it with R&B, with pop.
Yeah.
He was truly a crossover artist.
Yeah.
You know, before that was even really a term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been curious about how his early life shaped him. I mean, just think about this.
Sure.
Born in 1945, contracts polio as a kid.
Wow.
That's got to have a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, and what's remarkable is that he starts playing sax at 11
Wow.
to strengthen his lungs.
Oh.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Talk about turning adversity into art.
Right. Yeah.
And then by 14, he's jamming in blues clubs with Albert King, with Little Milton. I mean,
Wow.
these experiences had to be just foundational to his development.
Can you imagine being 14 years old and playing with these blues giants?
Right.
That raw, visceral energy, it had to have infused his style in some way.
Oh, without a doubt, you can hear echoes of those early blues influences
Yeah.
in his playing, even decades later.
Really?
It's like that gritty, soulful energy just became part of his musical DNA.
So he's got this blues background. He's honing his skills in the clubs.
Yeah.
But then he lands in San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
during the Summer of Love in 1967,
Right.
joins the Paul Butterfield Blues Band.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant shift.
It is, and it leads him to Woodstock in '69.
Oh, wow.
I mean, think about that for a second, playing at Woodstock.
Yeah.
That's not just a gig, that's a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
A moment in history.
Totally. But
Yeah.
it wasn't just Woodstock. He starts working with some of the biggest names in music. Stevie Wonder on Talking Book. Yeah.
David Bowie on Young American.
That's right.
I mean, his sax is suddenly part of the soundtrack of a generation.
It is. And what's so fascinating is how effortlessly he moved between these different worlds. It's like he could play with Stevie Wonder one day and David Bowie the next, and it never felt forced or out of place.
Right.
You know, he just had this innate ability to adapt his sound while still remaining distinctly David Sanborn.
So that takes us to the 70s, his session heyday.
Oh, yeah.
James Brown,
Yeah.
the Eagles, Aretha Franklin, Bruce Springsteen. I mean,
It goes on and on.
the list goes on and on. He was everywhere.
Yeah.
Was this a conscious decision on his part or just a natural progression of things?
You know, I think it was probably a combination of both.
Okay.
I mean, he was incredibly talented and in high demand, but he also had this relentless drive to explore different musical territories.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to step outside of his comfort zone, you know, and try new things.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he ends up joining the Brecker Brothers band.
And pushing the boundaries of jazz fusion alongside Michael Brecker.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, he releases his debut solo album, Taking Off, in 1975.
Yeah.
And this is where that signature Sanborn sound really starts to solidify.
Yeah, you can hear it all coming together in Taking Off, all of those early influences and experiences, right?
Right.
You've got the bluesy grit, the soulful phrasing, the technical mastery. I mean, it's all there.
Yeah.
But there's also something new emerging, like a more refined and sophisticated approach
Oh, interesting.
that kind of hints at the direction his music would take in the years to come.
Okay, so this is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we need to save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, let's do it. So ready to pick up where we left off with Sanborn's solo career.
Absolutely. The late 70s and the 80s,
Yeah.
that seems to be like a defining era for him.
Right.
What were some of the key moments or albums that stand out from that period?
Well, you've got albums like Hideaway, Voyeur, Backstreet. I mean, they were massive. They weren't just commercially successful, but they really captured that sound of the 80s, that fusion of jazz, R&B, pop. It was all there.
I remember Voyeur specifically winning a Grammy
Yeah.
for Best R&B Instrumental Performance. What was it about that album that resonated so strongly with audiences and critics?
Voyeur just had this incredibly sophisticated sound, but it still retained that raw, almost gritty edge
Yeah.
that Sanborn was known for.
Huh?
And the emotional depth of his playing on that record is just undeniable. You can feel the passion and intensity in every note. It was like he was pouring his heart and soul into every solo.
Yeah, and it wasn't just studio albums straight to the heart
Oh, yeah.
from '84 that really captured his energy as a live performer. I remember feeling like I was right there in the audience, experiencing the raw power of his improvisations.
And that's a testament to his incredible talent as an improviser. I mean, he could take off on these just blistering solos that were so technically brilliant, but they always felt connected to the music, never self-indulgent. You know, he was always telling a story with his saxophone, even when he was improvising.
It feels like this era is also where his collaboration with Marcus Miller really takes off.
Right.
Miller produced several of his albums, co-wrote a bunch of songs. What was it about that partnership that worked so well?
Well, I think, Miller being this phenomenal bassist and producer himself, he brought this unique groove and energy to Sanborn's music. And it seemed like they had this intuitive understanding of each other's musical language, which resulted in this sound that was both sophisticated and incredibly funky. You could just feel the energy bouncing back and forth between them.
It wasn't just about technical prowess or catchy grooves, though. What always struck me about Sanborn was his ability to convey such raw emotion through his playing.
Oh, absolutely.
He could make that saxophone weep, rage, whisper. It was like he was channeling these deep universal feelings that everyone could relate to.
That's a great point. I mean, he wasn't just a technician. He was a true artist who understood the power of music to connect with people on a deeper emotional level.
Right.
He could make you feel joy, sadness, longing. I mean, the whole spectrum of human emotions.
Yeah.
And that's what made his music so enduring.
And speaking of enduring, his influence on other saxophonists is undeniable.
Oh, yeah.
Guys like Kenny Garrett, Eric Marienthal, Kirk Whalum, they all cite Sanborn as a major influence.
Absolutely.
What do you think it was about his style that resonated so strongly with other musicians?
Well, I think it was probably a combination of factors, right? I mean, his technical brilliance was inspiring, of course.
Sure.
But it was more than that. He had this unique sound, this way of blending genres and pushing boundaries that was incredibly influential.
Yeah.
I think he showed other musicians that it was okay to experiment, to break the rules, to create something new and exciting.
But he didn't just influence musicians. He was also the host of Night Music, this late-night show that brought jazz and world music to a wider audience.
Right.
Think about the guests he had on Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Eric Clapton.
Like a who's who of musical legends.
It was like a who's who of musical legends.
And night music was groundbreaking in a lot of ways. I mean, it wasn't just a performance show. It was a platform for these artists to talk about their music, their influences, their creative process. It was like this glimpse into the minds of some of the most innovative and influential musicians of the 20th century.
Wow.
And Sanborn was the perfect host for that. He had that easygoing charisma and deep knowledge of music that allowed him to connect with these artists on a personal level.
And let's not forget his contributions to film scores.
Oh, right.
From Lethal Weapon to Scrooged.
Yeah.
His sax added this unique flavor to these iconic films. It's almost like he was able to tap into the emotional core of these stories and enhance them with his music.
And you can hear that cinematic quality in a lot of his solo work as well.
Yeah.
There's a sense of drama of storytelling that transcends the boundaries of genre.
So he's got this incredibly successful solo career.
Yeah.
He's hosting a groundbreaking TV show. He's scoring films. Is there anything this guy didn't do?
Well, he never stopped learning and evolving,
Right.
He continued to release albums well into the 2000s and 2010s.
Wow.
Exploring new sounds, collaborating with this diverse range of artists. I mean,
this is where albums like Only Everything and Time and the River come in.
Right.
He was in his 60s and 70s when he released those albums.
Yeah, and they still had that signature Sanborn fire and passion.
It's amazing.
It really is. I mean, he never lost that spark, that drive to create something new and expressive.
Yeah.
And those later albums are a testament to his artistry, his willingness to keep pushing boundaries and exploring different musical landscapes.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I feel like there's still so much to unpack. His later career, his legacy, his impact on the music world.
Absolutely.
I'm eager to dive into all of that in the final part of our deep dive. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into David Sanborn.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey, tracing his career.
It has.
From those early blues clubs all the way to global stages, his genre-bending music, those iconic collaborations.
Yeah.
Now, we touched on his later albums, Only Everything and Time in the River,
Right.
which came out when he was in his 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
What struck you about those albums?
You know what's fascinating is that even in those later works, he was still exploring, he was still pushing himself.
Oh, wow.
Like Time in the River, for example, has these beautiful, almost introspective moments that you don't necessarily hear in his earlier, high-energy work.
It's like he was reflecting on his journey, finding these new layers of expression within that signature sound. And you're right, that introspective quality is definitely there.
Yep.
Did that signal a shift in his musical approach, or was it more of an evolution?
I think it was an evolution,
Okay.
a deepening.
Yeah.
He was always a soulful player.
Yeah.
But in those later albums, there's a maturity, a wisdom that comes through. It's like he was tapping into something deeper.
Oh, wow.
Something beyond the notes themselves.
And yet that unmistakable Sanborn sound is still there.
Absolutely.
That bright, edgy tone, the way he bends those notes.
Oh, yeah.
That soulful phrasing, you always know it's him.
It's funny you say that because I think that speaks to his artistry.
Okay.
He wasn't just chasing trends or trying to reinvent himself.
Right.
He was constantly evolving, refining, but always staying true to his own unique voice.
We've talked a lot about his influence on other saxophonists, but his impact extends far beyond that.
Absolutely.
He was a mentor to countless musicians, a champion of jazz education.
Oh, yeah.
He gave back to the music that gave him so much.
He was incredibly generous with his time and his knowledge, conducting master classes, leading workshops, sharing his passion with the next generation. And it wasn't just about technique.
Right.
He emphasized the importance of feeling, of storytelling, of connecting with the music on a deeper level.
That reminds me of something you said earlier about his music transcending cultural barriers. It's not just jazz, it's not just R&B, it's something more, something universal that speaks to the human experience.
His music has this incredible ability to connect with people on an emotional level.
Yeah.
Regardless of their background or their musical preferences, it's about joy, sadness, longing, all those raw emotions that we all share. And that's why you hear his music everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Films and TV shows to commercials. It just has this timeless quality that resonates with people from all walks of life.
As we wrap up this deep dive into David Sanborn, what do you think is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from his story?
I think it's the power of perseverance. The importance of following your passion and the idea that music can truly be a transformative force.
Wow.
Sanborn faced challenges early on, but he never let them define him.
Right.
He used music as a way to heal, to connect, to express himself.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he created a legacy that will continue to inspire and move people for generations to come.
Beautifully said. He was more than just a saxophonist.
Yeah.
He was an innovator, a collaborator,
A mentor,
and a true artist who left an indelible mark on the world of music.
His story is a reminder that music is more than just notes on a page.
Yeah.
It's a language, a way of communicating, a powerful force that can bring people together and uplift the human spirit.
And on that note, we'll bring our deep dive into the world of David Sanborn to a close.
Well said.
We hope this journey has sparked a new appreciation for his music and inspired you to explore his vast and diverse catalog.
Yeah, keep the music playing.